If you still want me, come get me. My thumb hovered over the screen for a full second before I pressed send, like my body knew something my mind refused to admit, like there was still time to stop the chain reaction I was about to trigger, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. And the second the message disappeared into that quiet gray bubble, my reflection in the mirror fractured into someone I didn't recognize. A bride in a dress that cost more than my car, standing in a room filled with soft golden light and voices that kept saying how perfect everything was, how lucky I was, how beautiful I looked, and all I could hear was the faint echo of my own heartbeat. Uneven, too loud, too fast, like it was trying to escape my chest before I could make the biggest mistake of my life. I pressed my hands against the vanity to steady myself, but my fingers wouldn't stop trembling. The satin of the gown brushing against my skin felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else, someone who actually wanted this life, someone who could walk down that aisle without feeling like they were slowly suffocating. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe the way they taught in those pre-wedding videos. Slow in, slow out. But the air wouldn't settle. It stuck somewhere between my throat and my lungs, and all I could think about was his name, the one I had promised myself I would forget, the one I had deleted, erased, buried so deep it shouldn't have been possible to find again, and yet I had typed it from memory like muscle reflex, like it was carved into me in ways I couldn't undo. Alex Volkov. Even thinking it felt dangerous, like saying it out loud would pull him into the room, into my life, into this moment that was supposed to belong to someone else, someone safe, someone predictable, someone who would never make my hands shake or my heart race like it was on the edge of something irreversible. I told myself it was just a message, just words. Maybe he wouldn't see it. Maybe the number had changed. Maybe he had moved on. Maybe I was talking to a ghost. But the lie didn't hold, not even for a second, because I knew him. I knew the way he moved through the world, the way nothing slipped past him, the way silence was never empty when he was involved. It was loaded, intentional, waiting, and somewhere out there, probably in a place I couldn't imagine, he was looking at his phone right now, reading my words, those 5 reckless words that broke every promise I had made to myself. And for a moment the entire world seemed to pause, like even time was holding its breath to see what he would do next. A knock came at the door, soft, careful. My maid of honor asking if I was ready, if I needed anything, her voice warm and excited, full of a future I was supposed to step into in less than 2 hours. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out, because the truth was I had just invited a different future to come find me, one that didn't ask for permission, one that didn't wait for vows or approval, one that didn't belong in a church filled with white roses and polite smiles. And as I stared at the screen again, waiting for those 3 dots to appear, I realized something that made my chest tighten even more. I hadn't sent that message by mistake. Not really. Not in the way people like to pretend. I sent it because some part of me still believed he would come. And worse, I wasn't sure I wanted him to stay away. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly and disappeared just as fast, like he had started to reply and then decided against it. And somehow that silence felt heavier than any words he could have sent. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the screen waiting for something. Anything. But nothing came. No message. No call. Just that quiet confirmation that he had seen it. That he knew. And that he was choosing what to do next on his own terms. I pressed my phone against my chest as if I could stop time from moving forward. But outside the door I could hear footsteps, laughter, the low hum of guests arriving early. The world continuing exactly as planned while mine tilted slightly off balance. I forced myself to unlock the door and step back into the hallway, smiling when I needed to, nodding when someone told me how stunning I looked, every word washing over me without meaning. Because underneath it all there was a question echoing louder with every passing second. Would he come? I told myself I did not care, that this was a moment of weakness, a lapse in judgment, that I would walk down that aisle and everything would settle into the life I had chosen, safe, predictable, clean. But my hands betrayed me, still trembling as I adjusted the veil over my shoulders. The fabric light as air but heavy with expectation. My mother appeared at my side. Her eyes soft, proud, searching my face like she was trying to memorize this version of me, the version that belonged to this life. And I smiled for her, because I did not know how to explain that I had already set something else in motion, something that could not be undone with a smile or a promise. Time stretched in strange ways after that, minutes feeling like hours. Every glance toward the entrance sending a sharp pulse through my chest. Every black car that passed outside making my stomach tighten. I told myself I was imagining things, that he would not actually come, that men like him did not show up to places like this, not without a reason stronger than a single message. And then my phone buzzed again in my hand, a single vibration that felt louder than the church bells outside. I looked down slowly, almost afraid of what I would see, and there it was, his name, not saved, not labeled, just the number I knew by heart lighting up my screen with one short message that made everything inside me go still. I am already on my way. My fingers tightened around the phone as the words settled in. Simple, controlled, inevitable, just like him. And for a second I considered turning it off, pretending I never saw it, pretending this could still be contained. But the truth was already there, rising quietly beneath my fear. I had wanted him to come, maybe not consciously, maybe not in the way that made sense, but deep enough that I had reached for him anyway, and now he was coming, not asking questions, not waiting for permission, just closing the distance between the life I was supposed to live and the one I had tried to forget. I lifted my gaze toward the front doors of the church, sunlight spilling through the glass, people moving in and out, unaware that something unseen was approaching, something that did not belong to this world of white flowers and polite conversations, something that belonged to me in a way I had never fully escaped. And as my heart began to race again, faster this time, steadier, like it had made a decision before I did, I realized I was no longer waiting for the ceremony to begin. I was waiting for him. The air shifted before I saw anything, subtle at first, like a change in pressure that only my body seemed to notice, my fingers tightening around the bouquet as I stood near the entrance, listening to the soft music drifting through the chapel, the quiet conversations, the shuffle of polished shoes against marble floors. Everything normal, everything exactly the way it was supposed to be, except for the way my heartbeat refused to settle, steady but louder now, like it was counting down to something inevitable. I told myself I was imagining it. That anticipation had turned into something irrational. But then one by one the conversations near the doors began to fade, not abruptly, not dramatically, just a slow quieting, like people were lowering their voices without realizing why, like something had entered the space that did not need to announce itself to be noticed. I lifted my gaze and saw the first glimpse of black through the glass doors, a reflection at first, then a shape, then a presence that made my breath catch before my mind could catch up. The doors opened, not rushed, not forced, just a smooth motion that felt deliberate, controlled. And then he stepped inside. Alex Volkov did not look around. He did not hesitate. He did not acknowledge the way the room seemed to tilt slightly in his direction. He simply walked forward like he had always belonged wherever he chose to stand. His suit dark, perfectly fitted, the kind of quiet precision that did not demand attention, but took it anyway. And for a moment I forgot how to breathe, not because of fear, not entirely, but because seeing him here, in this place that was never meant for him, made everything else feel unreal, like the life I had been preparing to step into was suddenly just a backdrop, something temporary, something fragile. His eyes found mine without searching, like they had never lost me in the first place. And that was when the rest of the world disappeared. The music, the voices, even the weight of the dress against my skin, all of it faded until there was only that distance between us, measured in a few dozen feet that suddenly felt too small, too exposed. I felt my pulse in my fingertips, in my throat, everywhere at once as he continued walking, unhurried, each step steady, certain, as if he already knew how this would end. And maybe he did. Maybe he always did. Someone said my name behind me, soft, questioning, but I could not turn, could not break the line that had formed between us, because I knew that if I looked away even for a second, I might lose whatever fragile courage had brought me to send that message in the first place. He stopped a few feet away, close enough now that I could see the details. I had tried to forget the sharp line of his jaw, the calm intensity in his expression, the way nothing about him seemed rushed even though everything about this moment should have been chaos. And when he finally spoke, his voice was low, even, the same controlled tone that had always made it impossible to tell what he was truly thinking. You called me. The words settled between us like something solid, undeniable, and I swallowed, my throat dry as I tried to find a response that would not unravel everything. I should not have. I managed, my voice quieter than I intended, almost lost in the space between us. But he heard it. Of course he did. His gaze did not shift, did not soften. It simply held mine with that same unwavering focus that had once felt like safety and now felt like something far more dangerous. You do not reach for me by accident, he said, not accusing, not angry, just stating something he believed to be true. And the worst part was that I could not deny it, not completely, not in a way that mattered, because standing there, with him in front of me and everything else fading into the background, I realized that this moment had been building long before I pressed send, long before I put on the dress, long before I convinced myself I could choose a different life. And now that he was here, now that he had closed the distance, the question was no longer whether he would come. It was what I was going to do now that he had. Someone stepped between us before I could answer, a hand lightly touching my arm, pulling my attention away just enough to break the moment. Emily, honey, we need to get you ready. My mother's voice was gentle but firm, her smile polite as she glanced at him without truly seeing him, not yet understanding who he was or why the air had changed the second he walked in. I felt the weight of her touch, grounding and heavy at the same time, a reminder of everything that was expected of me in the next hour, the ceremony, the vows, the life that had been carefully arranged piece by piece until there was no room left for uncertainty. But uncertainty was all I felt standing there, caught between two versions of myself that could not exist at the same time. I turned slightly, enough to acknowledge her, enough to give the illusion that everything was still under control. I just need a minute, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. And she hesitated, studying my face like she was searching for something she could not quite name. Then she nodded slowly and stepped back, her heels clicking softly against the marble as she moved away, leaving me alone again in the space that suddenly felt too quiet, too exposed. I looked back at him, and he had not moved, not even an inch, as if the world had adjusted around him instead of the other way around, his gaze still locked on mine, patient but unyielding, like he had already given me the time I needed and would not offer more. You should not be here, I said finally, the words sounding weaker than I intended, because even as I said them I knew they were not true. Not really. He tilted his head slightly, a small movement, but enough to shift something in the air. Between us, you asked me to come, he replied, the same calm certainty threading through his voice, not loud, not demanding, just there, impossible to ignore. I glanced toward the altar, visible through the open doors, rows of white chairs filling with guests, the soft hum of anticipation building as the ceremony drew closer. Everything was ready. Everything was waiting for me. And yet it all felt distant, like I was looking at someone else's life from the outside. I did not think you would actually do it, I admitted, my fingers tightening around the bouquet until the stems pressed into my palm. And for the first time something almost like a shadow of a smile touched his expression, brief and gone before I could fully recognize it. You always underestimate me, he said quietly, and there was something in the way he said it that made my chest tighten, not anger, not accusation, just a simple truth that carried more weight than it should have. A silence settled between us again, but this time it was different, heavier, filled with everything we were not saying, everything that had been left unfinished the last time we stood this close. I could feel eyes on us now, subtle at first, then more noticeable, guests whispering, staff pausing, the ripple of awareness spreading outward as people began to realize that something was not part of the plan. I should go back, I said, but I did not move, my feet rooted to the floor as if the choice itself was holding me in place. You can, he replied, and for the first time there was a slight shift in his tone, something quieter, almost softer but no less certain. Walk away and I will leave. No questions, no consequences. The words should have made it easier, should have given me an exit, a way to step back into the life I had been preparing for, but instead they made everything more complicated, because he was not forcing me, not claiming anything, not taking control the way I had once feared he would. He was giving me the choice, and somehow that felt more dangerous than anything else. I swallowed, my heart racing as I searched his face for something, a sign, a hesitation, anything that would make this decision less final. But there was nothing, just that same steady presence, waiting. And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been avoiding since the second I sent that message. This was never about whether he would come. It was about whether I would choose to go. The music inside the chapel shifted, a soft cue that the ceremony was about to begin, and it cut through me sharper than it should have, like a reminder that time was not waiting for me to figure this out. My grip on the bouquet loosened slightly as I became aware of how tightly I had been holding it, the stems leaving faint impressions against my palm, grounding me in a moment that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I glanced once more toward the aisle, where everything had been carefully arranged, every seat filled with people who believed they were about to witness something certain, something right. And for a second, I tried to picture myself walking down that path, smiling, steady, saying words that would seal a life I had convinced myself I wanted, but the image would not hold. It fractured almost immediately, replaced by something quieter but far more real. The memory of standing in a different place. With him, feeling something I had spent months trying to rationalize away, I pulled in a breath that did not quite reach my lungs and looked back at Alex. He had not moved, not pushed, not stepped closer, just waited with that same unshakable calm. Like he understood that whatever happened next had to come from me, not him. Why now? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it, because part of me needed to understand why he would come all the way here for a message that should have meant nothing. His eyes did not leave mine as he answered, because you would not have sent it unless you meant it. The simplicity of it made my chest tighten. No hesitation, no doubt, just a quiet certainty that felt more intimate than anything he could have said. I shook my head slightly, not in disagreement, but in disbelief. You do not know that, I said, my voice softer now, almost lost under the distant echo of the organ beginning to play. But he did not look convinced. I know you, Emily, he replied, and hearing my name from him again, steady and familiar, sent something through me I could not ignore, something that had nothing to do with logic or safety or the life waiting just a few steps away. The doors to the chapel opened wider, a signal, a transition, and I could feel the shift in attention as people began to turn, expecting to see me step forward, to begin, to follow the path that had been set. My heart started to race again, faster this time, louder, like it was trying to push me toward a decision before I could retreat into hesitation. I looked down at the bouquet in my hands, at the perfect arrangement of white roses that symbolized something pure and certain. Something that felt increasingly out of place the longer I stood here, and slowly, without fully thinking it through, I lowered it onto the nearby table, the soft sound barely noticeable, but final in a way that made my pulse spike. When I looked back up, his expression had not changed, but something in his eyes sharpened, not surprise, not triumph, just recognition, like he had been waiting for that exact moment. You should go, I said again, but this time the words felt different, not like a dismissal, more like a test, and he seemed to understand that too. You want me to leave, he said, not moving, not turning away, just giving the question back to me in a way that forced me to confront it honestly. I opened my mouth to answer and found that I could not because I did not have the words, but because I finally understood what they would mean. A single step would decide everything, not just for me, but for the version of my life that was already waiting inside that chapel. And as the music swelled and my name was called softly from within, I realized that I was no longer standing between two choices. I was standing at the edge of 1 inch. My name echoed again from inside the chapel, a little louder this time, not impatient yet, but close, the kind of call that expected an answer. And for a second my entire body reacted on instinct, my shoulders tightening, my breath catching, my feet almost shifting toward the open doors where everything was waiting for me, everything I had promised to step into. But I did not move, not forward, not back, just stayed there suspended in a moment that felt impossibly thin, like the next second would decide everything before I even understood it. I could feel the weight of attention now, subtle but growing, guests turning in their seats, whispers beginning to ripple through the room as the delay stretched longer than it should have. My mother's voice again, softer but closer this time. Emily, it is time. And I closed my eyes briefly, just long enough to shut out the expectation, the carefully planned future, the version of myself that had been rehearsed over and over until it felt almost real. And when I opened them again, he was still There, exactly where he had been, unchanged by the shifting energy around us, as if none of it mattered unless I made it matter. "You are going to miss it," I said quietly, the words barely above a whisper, but carrying more weight than they should have. And he tilted his head slightly, studying me in that way that always made it feel like he saw more than I was willing to admit. "Then do not let me," he replied, simple, direct, and somehow that made everything inside me tighten, because he was not telling me what to do. He was handing the decision back to me again, and I realized that was what made this so difficult. He was not taking control. He was waiting for me to choose him, fully, without hesitation. My fingers curled slightly at my sides, empty now without the bouquet, the absence of it making me feel exposed in a way I had not expected, like I had already let go of something without fully acknowledging it. The music swelled again, a clear signal. The moment had arrived, whether I was ready or not, and I could feel it in the way the air seemed to press in around me, urging me forward, urging me to follow through, to complete the path that had been laid out so perfectly. I glanced once more toward the aisle, toward the man waiting at the end of it, a man who represented stability, certainty, a future that made sense on paper, a future that would not keep me awake at night questioning everything. And for a brief second, I almost stepped forward, almost let that version of my life take over. But then I looked back at Alex, and nothing about him was safe. Nothing about him was predictable. And yet standing there, with him watching me like I was the only thing that mattered in that entire room. I felt something settle inside me, not calm exactly, but clarity, sharp and undeniable, like a line being drawn that I could not step back from once I crossed it. I took a slow breath, deeper this time, letting it reach all the way through me, and then I stepped, not toward the chapel, not toward the waiting crowd, but toward him, just one step, small enough that no one else might have noticed at first, but enough to shift everything, enough to answer the question that had been building since the moment I sent that message. His gaze did not waver, but something in it changed, something quieter, more certain, like he had been waiting for that exact movement. "Are you sure?" he asked, not doubting, just confirming, and I swallowed, feeling the weight of everything I was about to leave behind pressing against me for one final second before I answered, not with hesitation, not with uncertainty, but with a truth I could no longer ignore. I was never going to walk down that aisle, and for the first time since this day began, my hands stopped shaking. The moment my foot settled into that step, everything around me seemed to react at once, like the world had been waiting for that exact movement to decide how to unfold next. The music inside faltered just slightly, not enough for everyone to notice, but enough that I felt it, a shift in rhythm that mirrored the one inside my chest. And then the whispers started to grow louder, no longer contained, no longer subtle. People turning fully now, eyes following the direction I had chosen, the direction I was still choosing with every inch of distance I closed between us. My mother's voice called my name again, sharper this time, confusion threading through it, disbelief just beginning to surface, but I did not turn, because I knew if I looked back now, if I saw the faces, the expectations, the disappointment forming in real time, I might hesitate, and hesitation was something I could not afford anymore, not after everything that had already been set in motion. I reached him, close enough now that the rest of the room faded again, not completely, but enough that it felt like we were standing in a separate space carved out of everything else, his presence steady, grounding in a way that did not make sense considering how unpredictable everything about him was supposed to be. And yet this moment felt more certain than anything I had been preparing for all morning. "You are about to cause a scene," I said quietly, the corner of my mouth almost lifting despite the weight of everything around us. And for the first time there was a trace of something lighter in his expression, not amusement exactly, but acknowledgement. "You already did," he replied, and I let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding, because he was right. The moment I chose to step away from that aisle, from that life, the scene had already begun, the consequences were already in motion. There was no quiet way back from this. Footsteps approached behind me, faster now, more urgent, and I could feel the presence of people closing in, trying to understand, trying to intervene before something irreversible happened. "Emily, what is going on?" The voice came from my left, familiar, strained, and I knew without looking who it was. The man waiting at the end of the aisle. The man I was supposed to marry, standing here now instead, pulled out of place by a choice he had not seen coming. I turned slightly then, just enough to meet his gaze, and the look in his eyes made something inside me tighten. Not guilt exactly, but the recognition that I had let this go too far before. Admitting the truth, "I am sorry," I said. The words simple but heavier than anything else I could have offered, and I meant them, not for choosing this moment, but for not choosing it sooner, for letting him believe in something I was no longer certain of. His expression shifted, confusion giving way to something quieter, something that understood more than I expected, and he exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair as if trying to process everything at once. "You are not coming back," he said, not a question, just a realization, and I shook my head, small but certain. "No, I am not." The silence that followed felt different from the others, less tense, more final, like something had settled into place. Whether anyone liked it or not, I turned back to Alex then, the choice fully made now, no longer hanging in the balance. And for a moment we just stood there, the noise of the room rising again around us, louder now, more chaotic, but distant in a way that made it easier to ignore. "Are you ready?" he asked, and the question was simple, but it carried everything that came with it. The unknown, the risk, the life that did not come with guarantees, and I felt a flicker of hesitation, not because I doubted him, but because I understood exactly what I was stepping into. And then I took another breath, steady this time, and answered in the only way that made sense. I already chose, and without looking back again, I reached for his hand closed around mine with a steadiness that cut through the noise like a line drawn in the middle of chaos, not tight, not forceful, just certain, like he knew I would not pull away. And the second our fingers touched, something inside me settled in, a way I had not felt all day, the trembling that had followed me since the morning finally quieting as if my body had been waiting for this exact moment to stop fighting itself. The room behind us continued to unravel in soft, controlled confusion, voices rising, footsteps shifting, someone calling my name again, but it all felt distant now, like a scene happening behind glass, visible but no longer able to reach me. Alex did not look back, did not acknowledge any of it. His focus stayed on me. For one brief second longer, long enough to confirm that I was still there, still choosing this. And then he turned, guiding me with him toward the exit, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving forward with that same quiet confidence that made everything feel inevitable. The doors opened before we reached them. I did not see who moved to do it, only the way the light outside spilled in, brighter than I expected, almost blinding after the soft glow of the chapel. I blinked as we stepped through, the cool air brushing against my skin, carrying away the last traces of the space I had just left behind, and for a moment I felt weightless, like I had stepped out of one version of reality, and had not fully landed in the next yet. The sound of the doors closing behind us was soft but final, a muted click that echoed louder in my mind than it should have, marking a line I could not cross back over even if I wanted to. I did not turn around, not because I was afraid to, but because I knew it would not change anything. What I had left behind was already part of a past I could not return to. The black car waited at the curb, sleek and still, like it had been there the entire time. Like this had always been the ending to a story I had been trying to rewrite. The driver stepped forward, opening the door without a word, his movements precise, practiced, as if moments like this were not unusual in the world Alex belonged to. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough to feel the edge of doubt brush against me, not regret, but awareness, the understanding that this step would take me somewhere unknown, somewhere I had once walked away from for a reason. And I felt. Alex paused beside me, not pulling, not urging, just waiting again, giving me that same choice one last time. "You can still walk away," he said quietly, his voice lower now, meant only for me. And I looked at him, really looked this time, past the control, past the certainty, to the part of him that did not ask for anything lightly, the part that had come here because I had reached for him. And I realized something then that made everything else fall into place. I was not choosing him because he came for me. I was choosing him because I had never truly let him go. I shook my head slightly, a small movement, but enough to answer everything he had not asked out loud. And without another word, I stepped into the car, the fabric of my dress shifting around me as I moved. unfamiliar and out of place in this new setting, and when he followed, the door closing softly behind us, the outside world faded once again, replaced by a quieter space, one that felt less like an ending and more like the beginning of something I could not yet define. The car started to move, smooth and steady, pulling away from the curb, from the chapel, from everything that had been waiting for me inside, and I exhaled slowly, leaning back against the seat as the distance grew, my reflection faint in the window beside me, still wearing the dress, still looking like a bride, but no longer belonging to the life it was meant for. And as the city passed by outside in a blur of motion and light, I realized that for the first time that day, I was not wondering what would happen next. I was ready to find out. The city, stretched out beyond the window in a blur of glass and motion, familiar streets passing by in a way that felt almost unreal, like I was watching a life I used to belong to from a distance I had not chosen until now. The white fabric of my dress pulled around me in soft folds, catching the light every time the car turned, a quiet reminder of where I had just been and what I had walked away from. I let my fingers rest against the cool surface of the window, tracing nothing, just grounding myself in something steady as everything else shifted too quickly to fully grasp. Beside me, Alex sat with the same composed stillness he had carried into the chapel, his presence filling the space without effort, without noise. And yet there was something different now, something less guarded, not visible to anyone else but unmistakable to me, like the distance that had existed between us before had narrowed into something more defined, more real. "You are quiet," he said after a moment, his voice low, but not pressing, just an observation that felt almost careful, and I let out a soft breath, my reflection in the glass catching my eye again. The contrast of who I looked like and who I had chosen to be settling into place in a way that felt both strange and right. "I am thinking," I replied, my voice softer now, no longer shaking, no longer uncertain in the way it had been just hours ago. He nodded slightly, as if that answer was enough, as if he understood that this moment did not need to be filled with explanations or reassurances. The silence that followed was different from the ones before, not tense, not waiting, just there, steady, like something we could both exist in without needing to define it. After a while, I turned toward him, studying his profile, the calm line of his expression, the way he seemed completely certain in a world that had just shifted so completely for me. "Did you ever think I would do it?" I asked, the question coming out more curious than anything else, and he glanced at me then, his eyes meeting mine with that same quiet intensity. "I knew you would choose the truth when it mattered," he said, and something about the way he said it made my chest tighten, not from doubt, but from recognition, because deep down, I knew that was what this had been, not impulse, not recklessness, but a moment where I stopped pretending long enough to act on what had always been there. I looked down at my hands, now still in my lap, the absence of the bouquet still noticeable, the absence of hesitation even more so. "What happens now?" I asked, the question simple but carrying the weight of everything I had yet to understand, everything I had just stepped into without a clear path ahead. And he did not answer right away, not because he did not have one, but because he was considering it, choosing his words in that deliberate way that meant they would matter. "Now," he said finally, "we do not go backward." The statement was quiet but absolute, and I felt it settle into me, not as a warning, but as a truth I had already accepted the moment I stepped away from that aisle. The car slowed slightly as we approached an intersection, the light outside shifting from green to red, and for a brief second everything paused again, the city holding still around us, and I realized that this time, the stillness did not feel uncertain. It felt like space, like something waiting to be filled not with expectation, but with choice. The light changed, the car moved forward, and I leaned back against the seat, letting my eyes close for just a moment, not to escape, but to feel the quiet settle fully into me. When I opened them again, I turned toward him once more, a small breath leaving my lips as I spoke. "Then let us see where this goes." And this time, when he looked at me, there was no distance left between what we had been and what we were about to become.